You ever watch a true crime doc and think, no way this could happen in real life? Then boom, Joe Rogan opens his podcast like he's narrating season 3 of Making a Murderer? Yeah, that's exactly what happened this week. Out of nowhere, Rogan drops a verbal grenade. Something about this story doesn't add up. Translation, we've officially entered the wait, did the widow do it? Cinematic universe. Before anyone could finish their morning cold brew, hashtags were trending, Reddit turned into CSI, and the internet was arguing harder than your uncle at Thanksgiving. Because if Joe Rogan, the guy who questions everything from UFOs to kale smoothies, starts saying this case smells funny, people listen. And this time, the smell? It's part mystery, part political soap opera, and 100% chaos. The line that lit the fuse, it started as a whisper, one of those offhand remarks Rogan drops when he's halfway between joking and uncovering a secret. But then he leaned into the mic, dropped his voice, and said the words that would ignite an online inferno. When everyone involved suddenly stops talking, that's not closure, that's containment. Boom, internet detonated. That one sentence ripped through timelines like a match in a gas leak. Within hours, clips of that line flooded TikTok, Reddit, and Twitter. The tone, calm, eerie, absolute, wasn't conspiracy crazy. It was the kind of quiet confidence that makes people go, wait, what does he know that we don't? Within days, Rogan's quote was everywhere, turned into memes, stitched into reaction videos, and dissected in live streams like it was a coded message. Influencers called it the moment the story turned from tragic to terrifying. News outlets pretended not to notice, but they did. You could feel it, the shift. What was once a fringe theory suddenly had a mainstream voice giving it oxygen. And it wasn't just what Rogan said, it was how he said it. He didn't raise his voice, he didn't rant. He paused. That pause became the punctuation mark of suspicion. You could practically hear a million keyboards clicking. Containment of what? Then came the ripple effect. Podcasters quoting him, politicians hinting questions remain, and digital detectives flooding YouTube with frame-by-frame analyses. Every blurred photo, every timeline gap, every clip of Charlie's widow looking too calm got re-examined under Rogan's echo. His audience, millions deep, wasn't content with theories anymore. They wanted proof. And when proof doesn't exist, the void fills itself with imagination. Rogan's line didn't just light the fuse, it gave everyone permission to pick up a torch. Because after that, nothing about Charlie Kirk's death stayed in the shadows. It became an open investigation powered by memes, mistrust, and millions of sleepless Reddit threads. And when Rogan closed the episode with, "You can't silence questions forever," the truth always leaks through the cracks. The internet didn't hear a warning, it heard a prophecy. Swiss cheese story energy. You know your story's in trouble when Joe Rogan compares it to Swiss cheese. Because once Rogan drops that line, this story's got more holes than Swiss cheese. It's not just funny anymore, it's fatal. That's the internet's cue to grab red string, open 15 tabs, and go full Reddit detective mode. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. The official narrative surrounding Charlie Kirk's death looked less like an airtight report and more like a pizza box after a raccoon fight. Every time someone tried to patch one hole, 2 more popped open. The timeline, full of gaps. The evidence, suddenly sealed. The witnesses vanished faster than a Kardashian apology tweet. Rogan's Swiss cheese moment didn't just spark laughs, it became the brand of the scandal. Memes exploded overnight, headlines with cheese emojis, Twitter threads saying nothing but holes, and TikToks remixing his quote over suspenseful bass drops. The internet had found its symbol for the chaos, and it was dairy-based. But beneath the humor was something darker. People started realizing that every time a detail didn't line up, it wasn't just a clerical error, it was a crack in the foundation. Why were key documents sealed within 72 hours? Why was a so-called decoy suspect arrested on unrelated charges right after yelling, "I did it"? And why did every attempt to clarify the facts somehow make things murkier? Even Rogan joked, "You could drive a Tesla through the plot holes in this thing." But that punchline had teeth because the inconsistencies were starting to look less like incompetence and more like strategy. Then came the next twist. Fans started noticing that certain headlines online were being quietly edited. Changed words, missing phrases, softer tones. Shooter confirmed became suspect in custody. Motive unknown became under review. Like someone was slowly rewriting the narrative one click at a time. And that's when Rogan said what everyone else was thinking. If the story keeps changing, maybe it was never true to begin with. Mic drop, internet meltdown. That quote alone turned the comments section into a full-blown courtroom. You had believers posting timelines like it was their full-time job, skeptics demanding evidence, and trolls dropping cheese emojis like confetti at a scandal parade. By the time the dust settled, Swiss cheese story energy wasn't just a phrase. It was a movement, a metaphor for everything the internet loves to hate. Contradictions, cover-ups, and chaos dressed up as official reports. Because when the holes start outnumbering the answers, even the calmest stories start to smell, well, a little off. And that's when Joe Rogan, with that sly smirk, said the line that summarized the entire situation. If it walks like a cover-up, leaks like a cover-up, and smells like Swiss cheese. He didn't even finish. He just leaned back, and the internet did the rest. Now this is where things get weird. Joe Rogan wasn't buying the official line that Tyler Robinson used a restored World War I rifle to take down Charlie Kirk, a century-old gun, at a university in 2025. Joe's eyebrows practically left orbit. He laughed, leaned into the mic, and said, "You're telling me this 22-year-old just casually rebuilt his granddad's museum piece like he's in a History Channel speedrun challenge?" Come on, the internet lost it, because when Rogan raises an eyebrow, half of Reddit opens Photoshop and the other half opens Google Maps. Here's where it gets suspicious. The first leaked image of that so-called antique rifle didn't look antique at all. Nope, sleek finish, polished stock, a modern composite frame, straight out of a Call of Duty loadout. You could practically see the Amazon Prime barcode. Rogan described it best. That's not a relic, that's a reboot. And the more people zoomed in on the screenshots, the stranger it looked. No rust, no wear, not even a single scratch. Either this 100-year-old weapon spent its entire life in a climate-controlled spa, or it wasn't the same gun at all. Then came the kicker. The rifle allegedly had no serial number. Joe's voice dropped, so an unregistered antique magically shows up, gets used in a high-profile assassination, and nobody asks where it came from. Yeah, that's normal. Cue the internet detectives. Twitter threads, Reddit breakdowns, YouTube slow motion analyses titled "This gun is not old." Proof. People were matching metal finishes, comparing stocks, even analyzing reflections on the scope. And the consensus? Whatever this thing was, it didn't belong in a museum. It belonged in a plot twist. The irony was almost cinematic. The weapon that was supposed to prove the suspect's guilt ended up becoming Exhibit A in the case for something bigger. Because every time an official source said antique, the evidence looked more and more like it came with a Bluetooth manual. One Redditor summed it up perfectly. They told us it's a relic from 1918, but it's giving 2023 energy. The memes rolled in. Grandpa's ghost gun, the what are you doing Wi-Fi rifle, and Indiana Jones, and the case of the factory new antique. It was hilarious. Until it wasn't. Because if the gun didn't match, then the question wasn't what happened. It was who staged it. And that's where Rogan got serious. He pointed out that the rifle story might have been a convenient smokescreen, a tidy headline that looked historical enough to distract from modern hands pulling modern strings. He said, when the murder weapon looks more like a prop than a clue, that's not evidence, that's choreography. Boom. Clip viral, internet on fire. From that moment on, the antique that looked brand new became more than a detail. It became a metaphor, the perfect image of this entire case. Something old dressed up to look familiar, but underneath, totally manufactured, because nothing says cover up, quite like a relic that shines under studio lighting. Just when everyone thought the internet chaos couldn't get any louder, Candace Owens kicked down the door and brought gasoline. Picture it, Joe Rogan's skepticism had barely cooled. The internet was mid-meltdown, and then boom, Candace logs on, hair perfect, tone surgical, eyes dead serious. She didn't comment on the story, she detonated it. Everything they told you about the Charlie Kirk case, she said, pausing for effect, is a lie. You could practically hear keyboards clacking across America. X went nuclear. Reddit servers started smoking. YouTube thumbnails popped up faster than popcorn. Candace Owens exposes the cover-up. Joe was right. Widow under fire. Candace wasn't just dropping opinions, she was dropping dossiers. She claimed she'd spoken to people close to the case, hinting that the so-called shooter, Tyler Robinson, might have been a fall guy. Her words dripped with confidence, the kind of tone that says, I know something you don't, and you're about to freak out. And freak out the internet did, because this wasn't Candace throwing shade, this was Candace throwing a flamethrower into the house of cards. She called the official narrative a script that doesn't even pretend to make sense. Then, like a lawyer in a designer blazer, she started connecting dots the media refused to touch. Odd timelines, missing footage, suspiciously sealed files, and one big unanswered question. Why did every trail lead back to the same small circle of powerful people? The chat section went ballistic. Some viewers cheered her on like she was the heroine in a political thriller. Others accused her of playing conspiracy Jenga on livestream. Either way, no one looked away. Then came the quote, the one that launched 1,000 reaction videos. "If this story were a movie," she said, "it would have been written by someone trying too hard to hide the ending." Mic dropped. Candace Owens didn't just join the conversation. She hijacked it, repainted it, and set it on fire. Every gossip blog, every news site, every TikTok commentary page suddenly had her face plastered across the timeline with captions like "Candace versus the establishment." And that's when it got interesting, because she didn't stop there. Candace hinted, no, teased, that she'd uncovered a political name lurking in the shadows of the case. No names dropped, but her smirk said enough. She knew exactly how to throw blood in the water without ever saying shark. People started speculating. Was she protecting someone? Was she threatening someone? Or was she just turning chaos into content gold? Either way, Candace Owens did what Candace Owens does best. She turned a mystery into a movement. The moment she hit end stream, the internet split in two. Team Candace said she was finally cracking open the truth. Team Skeptics said she'd gone full tinfoil queen. And somewhere in the middle sat millions of people whispering the same thing Rogan had said just days before. Something about this story doesn't add up, and that's when the real fun began. Because if Joe Rogan was the spark, Candace Owens was the flamethrower that made the whole forest burn. The audit that won't stop trending. If this were a movie, this is the part where the camera zooms in, the music goes low, and someone whispers, "Follow the money." Because just when people thought the Charlie Kirk chaos had peaked, it didn't. The internet found something new to obsess over. The audit. Yeah, the one Charlie reportedly launched just a week before everything went down. An internal audit that was supposed to be routine until it wasn't. At first, nobody cared. Audit sounds about as exciting as watching C-SPAN on mute. But once the rumor mill realized what it might have been digging into, suddenly it was the hottest word on social media. #AuditGate started trending. Reddit threads looked like FBI corkboards, and YouTube comment sections full-blown detective zones. So here's the tea that's keeping everyone up at night. This wasn't some ordinary accounting cleanup. According to insiders and a few mysteriously deleted posts, this audit was targeting a shadow department inside Turning Point USA, a division allegedly handling donations that vanished like socks in a dryer. Millions of dollars unaccounted for, payments redirected through consulting firms no one had ever heard of, and reportedly some connections to political figures who really wouldn't want their name surfacing in public filings. The audit that won't stop trending. If this were a movie, this is the part where the camera zooms in, the music goes low, and someone whispers, "Follow the money." Because just when people thought the Charlie Kirk chaos had peaked, it didn't. The internet found something new to obsess over. The audit. Yeah, the one Charlie reportedly launched just a week before everything went down. An internal audit that was supposed to be routine until it wasn't. At first, nobody cared. Audit sounds about as exciting as watching C-SPAN on mute. But once the rumor mill realized what it might have been digging into, suddenly it was the hottest word on social media. #AuditGate started trending. Reddit threads looked like FBI corkboards, and YouTube comment sections full-blown detective zones. So here's the tea that's keeping everyone up at night. This wasn't some ordinary accounting cleanup. According to insiders and a few mysteriously deleted posts, this audit was targeting a shadow department inside Turning Point USA, a division allegedly handling donations that vanished like socks in a dryer. Millions of dollars unaccounted for, payments redirected through consulting firms no one had ever heard of, and reportedly some connections to political figures who really wouldn't want their name surfacing in public filings. Candace Owens jumped back into the fire too, saying, "You don't audit millions of missing dollars and live to tell the tale." That quote alone made made her stream go viral. Memes exploded, podcasts replayed it on loop. Even Rogan, normally calm, skeptical Rogan, admitted that audit sounds like it touched something real messy. And once he said that, boom, the floodgates burst open again. You couldn't scroll for 2 seconds without seeing a new audit theory video. Creators started analyzing old TPUSA speeches, donation records, even Charlie's interviews for clues. Someone even claimed they found a pattern. Every major event, every major fallout, traced back to the same mysterious group of donors that Charlie had reportedly questioned. Now, here's the eerie part. According to a few insiders, who've since no-commented themselves into oblivion, the audit wasn't just about numbers, it was about people. Allegedly, Charlie had started looking into a personnel list connected to that division, and one of those names belonged to someone still in leadership today. That rumor alone kept hash audit files trending for 2 weeks straight. People demanded the documents. None were released. They demanded statements. The organization went silent. And when silence meets money, people don't calm down. They go feral. Reddit threads turned into open source investigations. Anonymous former interns started leaking files that might have been photoshopped, but no one cared. The narrative was too juicy, too cinematic. The story had become alive. Because now the audit wasn't just paperwork, it was a symbol, a forbidden folder that could explain everything. The truth, the motive, the reason Charlie's story doesn't make sense. And when Joe Rogan looked into the camera and said, "If this audit ever sees daylight, someone powerful is getting burned," the clip hit 10 million views overnight. That's when you knew. This wasn't a headline anymore. This was a movement, and the internet wasn't about to let it die. The decoy theory, coincidence or callback? Now this is where the story officially steps out of tragedy and walks straight into Hollywood thriller territory. Because just when everyone thought the mystery around Charlie Kirk's death couldn't get any stranger, the internet stumbled on what's now being called the decoy theory. And it's so bizarre, even Joe Rogan couldn't decide whether to laugh or lose his mind. Here's how it started. Minutes after the shooting, witnesses said a man, not the suspect mind you, suddenly jumped up, ripped off his jacket and started screaming, "I did it, I did it." Then for reasons known only to him and possibly his therapist, he reportedly began undressing. Yeah, right there in the middle of the chaos. Panic, confusion, and this guy's putting on a one-man Broadway show. Police quickly detained him, but here's where it gets creepy. That man, according to online sleuths, looked shockingly familiar. Old footage from past national tragedies began resurfacing. Grainy images that showed someone who looked almost identical to him standing in the background of other infamous events. 9/11s, the Boston Marathon, even smaller state-level incidents. The internet froze. Because what are the odds that one guy just happens to show up at multiple national crises and always ends up near the camera? Reddit detectives lost their collective minds. Within hours, you had side-by-side comparisons, voice analyses, AI reconstructions, and 10-hour YouTube documentaries titled "The Man Who's Always There." Rogan's reaction? Priceless. He leaned into the mic, smirking that half-amused, half-disturbed smirk, and said, "So you're telling me this dude's basically the Forrest Gump of American disasters?" The studio burst into laughter, but Joe didn't. Not really, because after the joke, he got quiet. And that's when everyone leaned in. He added, "If this guy's been popping up for decades and no one's asking questions, that's not coincidence. That's choreography." Boom. Instant clip, instant trend. That quote went viral so fast it practically broke X's algorithm, and then came the twist that made everyone's skin crawl. According to early reports, that same man, the so-called decoy, was arrested a few days later on completely unrelated charges. Not murder, not conspiracy, something random, something irrelevant, child-related material. Cue the collective internet shudder. But what freaked people out most wasn't the charge. It was the timing. The arrest happened within hours of Rogan's podcast going live, right after millions of people suddenly knew his face. The official story? Pure coincidence. The online theory? Someone needed him off the board. Fast. And that's when the decoy theory really exploded. People started wondering if the bizarre suspect behavior, the shouting, the self-incrimination, the meltdown, wasn't random at all? What if it was distraction by design? Think about it. You're at a live event. Chaos breaks out. Everyone's terrified, filming, panicking, and one guy steals the spotlight by acting insane. In that moment, nobody's looking at anything else. It's not about who did it. It's about who everyone saw. That's when Candace Owens stepped into the conversation like she'd been waiting for this twist all along. In her next live stream, she said, "It's like we're watching a magic trick. They make sure you look one way, while the real move happens somewhere else." And that's when the internet fully went feral. Memes, timelines, hashtags like #TheDecoy and #TheMan in every crisis. TikTok creators started tracing the man's appearances through history, overlaying his images across headlines like they were revealing the plot of a movie. Some said he was mentally unstable. Others called him an undercover asset. A few went full sci-fi, claiming he was part of an incident response team designed to steer public reaction. One viral tweet summed it up perfectly. He doesn't show up after chaos, he is the chaos. And whether you believed it or not, the energy around it was electric. Because suddenly, the story of Charlie Kirk's death wasn't just about a shooter, it was about a script, a performance where every role, even the crazy guy screaming, "I did it," was part of the scene. Rogan later revisited the theory, smirking as he said, "If that guy's a coincidence, I'm a hologram." And that line, that one line, turned the decoy theory from a meme into a movement. Because when patterns start repeating across decades, across disasters, across storylines, you have to ask yourself, is it really coincidence? Or are we just now noticing the callback? Pre-written vibes. The moment the story broke, before anyone had even caught their breath, there it was. Press statements, suspect photos, polished headlines, hashtags, everything. As if someone had just hit publish all. Like, excuse me? The manhunt wasn't even cold yet, and the internet already had infographics, emotional tributes, and exclusive sources queued up like a Netflix drop. That's not how real chaos moves. That's how marketing moves. Even Joe Rogan couldn't ignore how clean it all felt. He raised an eyebrow mid-podcast and said they had that story wrapped, stamped, and shipped before the smoke cleared. And when Rogan says something smells rehearsed, people listen, because here's the part that makes the conspiracy theorists foam at the mouth. Every single outlet, from blogs to blue-check journalists, was telling the exact same story word for word. No contradictions, no confusion, not even a typo between versions. It was like a chorus reading from the same teleprompter. Meanwhile, witnesses on the ground were saying, "Wait, hold up, that's not what we saw." And social media, oh, they caught that. Clips started surfacing showing totally different angles, different reactions, even different timelines. The internet did what it does best. It zoomed in, slowed it down, and turned every frame into a clue board. Within hours, TikTok detectives were stitching together montages titled, "Was this story pre-written?" The phrase stuck like glue. Now you couldn't scroll 5 seconds without hearing someone whisper, "Why does this feel produced?" It wasn't just that the story spread fast, it was the tone. Every outlet hit the same emotional beats, the same sympathy paragraph, the same tragic hero narrative, and the same sanitized summary of events. It read less like breaking news and more like episode 1 of a pre-approved docuseries. And here's where it gets even spookier. The timestamps didn't line up. Articles were showing last updated times before police officially confirmed anything. Screenshots started circulating of posts uploaded minutes after the shooting, some even naming the suspect before he was publicly identified. Now, either those journalists are psychic, or someone somewhere handed them a script before the curtain rose. Candace Owens caught wind of it too, and oh, she pounced. She went live, slammed her coffee on the desk, and said, "You can't report facts before they exist unless you wrote them first." Cue another internet meltdown. Within an hour, pre-written vibes had its own hashtag. Memes flooded X with screenshots of perfectly timed headlines captioned, "Did ChatGPT write this or the CIA?" And honestly, it was the one time the internet's sarcasm and suspicion were completely in sync. Because the more you looked at it, the more it really did feel rehearsed. Like the tragedy was the event, but the narrative was the product. By the next morning, YouTubers were uploading breakdowns titled "The Case That Dropped Like a Press Release." They paused on phrases used across networks. The same dramatic adjectives, the same photo angles, even the same lighting and clips released from different sources. It was eerie, surgical, intentional. channel, and Rogan wasn't done. He dropped one more line that hit harder than anything else that week. When a story sounds this polished this fast, it's not news, it's production. That quote, it broke the internet. Reaction channels looped it. TikTok used it as a soundbite, and within a day it had turned from speculation into scripture. Because the deeper everyone dug, the clearer it became. Maybe this wasn't just a tragedy caught on camera. Maybe it was a script with actors who didn't even know they were in the show. The quiet that got loud. At first, Turning Point USA's silence felt like grief, respectful, reserved, and corporate approved. But then that silence started sounding weirdly strategic. No statements, no updates, not even a generic "we'll release more info soon." Just nothing. And in the internet age, nothing is something. People noticed. Comment sections exploded. The longer they stayed quiet, the louder the suspicion got. Viewers started comparing it to the calm before a PR storm, or worse, a cleanup operation. Even Joe Rogan called it out, saying, "When everyone involved suddenly stops talking, that's not closure. That's containment." Boom. That quote alone turned quiet speculation into full-blown internet chaos. Suddenly, the silence wasn't comforting anymore. It was creepy. TikTok detectives started calling it strategic mourning. Others joked it felt like Netflix's version of damage control. Either way, what began as a moment of respect morphed into the world's loudest quiet. A blackout that only made the mystery roar louder. The widow's composure becomes the controversy. When Charlie Kirk's widow finally stepped in front of the cameras, everyone expected tears, trembling hands, red eyes, maybe even a moment of collapse. Instead, she gave calm, composed, perfect posture, and that threw the internet into chaos. Half the audience said, "Wow, strength under pressure." The other half went, "Hold up, why does she look like she's running a board meeting, not a memorial?" Her face, that single frame of unshakable calm, became a viral Rorschach test. People zoomed in, slowed it down, read emotions between blinks. Joe Rogan replayed the clip and muttered, "That's not grief, that's control." And that one line turned her composure into a national debate. Was she just strong, or was that the mask of someone hiding something deeper? Candace Owens only fueled the storm, hinting that her rise to power after Charlie's death looked a little too seamless. By then, her calm had become louder than any statement she could have made. Every photo, every still, every pause became a clue, or a weapon, depending on who you asked. In a world where emotion equals innocence, her silence wasn't strength anymore. It was suspicion wrapped in pearls. This might be bigger. Just when everyone thought the storm was fading, Joe Rogan leaned into the mic, voice low, steady, and dropped the line that froze the internet. "This might be bigger than we think." That single sentence hit like a grenade. It wasn't loud, but it was loaded. Viewers instantly felt the shift. This wasn't just about Charlie Kirk anymore. It was about the machinery behind the curtain. Within hours, comment sections turned into digital war zones. Reddit threads exploded. TikTok's dissected tone, timing, even Rogan's body language. What did he mean? Who was he hinting at? Theories went nuclear. Secret donors, political cover-ups, the audit that could expose everything. Rogan's pause after that line became the most replayed silence on the internet. It wasn't what he said, it was what he didn't say that sent chills. Candace Owens doubled down, hinting that people in power don't like when you start asking the wrong questions. Suddenly, this wasn't just a podcast moment. It was a pop culture earthquake. "This might be bigger" became the rallying cry, the meme, the movement. Because everyone watching realized, when someone like Rogan starts whispering bigger, it usually means someone else is panicking behind the scenes. Quick reality check, because we like our tea responsibly brewed. A lot of what's flying around is speculation, internet forensic hobby work, and vibes. Treat it like you treat a miracle ab workout. Interesting, but maybe don't stake your spine on it. Still, the documented beats, Rogan's skepticism, Candace's escalation, the audit chatter, and the viral fixation on the widow's composure are what launched this into trending orbit. If this breakdown fed your inner detective, tap like so the algorithm doesn't ghost you, drop your hot but civil theory in the comments, and subscribe for the next chapter. Because when stories have this many plot twists, you don't want to be that friend who hears it third hand at brunch.